Alright, I'm going to do a video today as promised for Dave Wilcox Jr. He had commented on one of my videos about baits for different trout species and some salmon species also. I don't get to do a lot of salmon fishing here. I would have to travel to New York, or I would have to travel out to Erie. I did fish for salmon when I lived in Ireland. I had done some salmon fishing. I also caught salmon incidentally when I was fishing for pike. So some of the same techniques would would cross over for those type of fish. Pretty much all larger trout species of fish are carnivore, and they will eat other fish, especially when they grow past a certain size. The only way to maintain their size is to eat other fish. But some large trout will also sometimes only feed on very small bait. Even insect hatches, a 10-pound trout can eat a very, very small fry or a very, very small insect, and sometimes that's all they will feed on. So a big thing with trout fishing is matching the hatch. Of course, with any type of fishing, you've got to match and try and match and use what they're feeding on at the particular time. Now today I'm not going to talk about fly fishing. I'm going to talk about artificial lure fishing. I have done fly fishing as well. I've used streamer type flies, natural imitation bait flies, flies that imitate bait fish. There's lots of different ways to fish for trout. Fly fishing, of course, is a big part of that. Dry fly, wet fly, sinking flies, lures that are flies that don't necessarily represent any type of natural bait. And the same with salmon. A lot of times with the salmon, especially if they're on migration, they will feed. They don't necessarily feed once they come back into fresh water. They feed when they're out at sea, and then when they're in fresh water, they basically attack out of aggression sometimes. It's like a reaction strike. So there's lots of different ways, lots of different techniques. Dave was fishing for Arctic char, which is a type of trout. Landlocked salmon and Atlantic salmon. Now, I had fished for Atlantic salmon in Ireland, the rivers. Of course, they come in from the sea and they spawn in the river and then go back out to sea. But you can usually catch those with spoons, spinners, any type of reaction type bait. I'm going to start with some of the soft plastic baits we use for trout here. Real simple stuff here. Curly tail jigs. These are small size. I mean, these for all lots of different types of fish. Bass, panfish, anything will eat that. Crappies. This is another one. It's a creature bait. These are made by Berkeley. This is just a little creature bait. It's a miniature version of what you would use for bass fishing. Just a smaller size. Here's a tube bait. It has a little lead jig head inside the tube, and then the tube has a skirt on it. These can imitate a lot of different types of things. They can imitate a fish. They can imitate a small crayfish, crawdaddy, whatever you want to call it. Here's a popular one in this area. This is called a trout magnet lure. What it is a little jig head with a split worm on it. You can see it's a little golden jig. Those are very popular around here. You can see the size of the jig. It's really small. That's the type of jig. It's got a weighted flat head, so it sits up on the bottom like that. You can also swim it. Of course, you can jig it up and down. So you can draw it through the water and fish it horizontally, or you can jig it vertically. You can do the same with this. This is another popular lure here. This is a Blakemore, a Roadrunner. It's got a little spinning blade on it, a jig head, and then I have it rigged on the plastic body. So you can fish this vertically, where you'd fish it straight up and down, and as it drops, the blade will spin, and as you pull it up, the blade will spin. You can also fish it horizontally. Of course, if you're dragging it through the water this way, the blade will also spin, so it creates flash. It's a super popular lure. They make larger versions of that for bass too. Another popular lure for trout, rooster tails, is spinnerbaits. Of course, it's a spinnerbait with hackle on it, so it's kind of half fly, half spinnerbait. Like that. This is a white and black one. They make all sorts of different colors. Here's a smaller version in the chartreuse in the yellow. You can see too that they have the different colored blades. blade type and size is you change according to water type. If it's real clear water and you want the spinnerbait to move pretty quick, I would use a willow leaf blade, which this is kind of a willow leaf shaped blade. Long and skinny. Gold also reflects a lot more than silver. The silver blades do reflect, but the gold has more reflection. So we'd use the gold in darker stained water and then use the silver in clearer water. But also if your water is dirty, I would use a spoon-shaped blade instead of a willow leaf. A willow leaf you can also draw faster through the water without causing the lure to rise, so you can control your depth better. So it depends on what depth of water you're fishing too. These are for streams and pretty much shallow water. Stream fishing or small river fishing. They also have real small spinners, of course, without the skirt. You can see this is a minnow type head, and then it's got a blade which is the same color as the body. So it gives it gives off a vibration, and it's got a little small profile. Again, this is a small profile blade. It's a willow leaf type blade. Doesn't displace a lot of water, but it puts off some vibration. A trout hunt by sight. They can hunt by smell in cloudier water, but most trout are found in clean, cold water. They don't like warm water. They don't like still water. They usually need some sort of cold water. The colder, the better. And we move on to, these are very popular here too. The Vibrex, the Blue Fox spinner baits for trout. As you can see, you get them all sorts of different colors. This one will be a little heavier. It's got a little heavier bell weight in the body, so it will fish easier in deeper water or faster moving water. Again, it doesn't have a big, huge blade on it. And this imitates small. Actually, this is the color of a par trout. You can see the spots on it with the blue. So it imitates a small trout. Now, big trout are cannibalistic. They will eat small trout. You get down to real basic colors. This is a very plain silver spinnerbait, inline spinnerbait. And these lures are, over 100 years old. I mean, nothing has changed with them. See, there's no pattern on that. It's just plain silver. But you can see even in the light how it reflects, it flashes. And then the blade itself causes vibration, which attracts the fish. Another lure that we use that's popular here. This is a hair jig. It's a marabou jig. Again, these catch multiple different species of fish. It's basically a lead head jig with a wool body, and then it's got the marabou feather in the tail. Now, I know it looks like just a puff ball here, but when you put the marabou in the water, it actually breathes. When you, if you fish it with a jerking action, the whole tail pulsates on it. It looks like it's alive. So it's pretty attractive to the fish. Now this too, you can draw horizontally in the water, or you can jig it vertically if you want to fish it in one spot. Like if you can use this for ice fishing as well. Usually ice fishing though, they use pretty small lures. This is not that's not too large. Pretty simple to fish though. Very effective. You can fish this under a bobber as well if you use it like a hair jig. A floating fly, they would call it. So you'd fish this. You'd have a bobber rigged whatever depth you want to fish, and you cast it and let the lure settle below the bobber. So when you cast it out and the lure comes down, it's going to land right below the bobber, and then it will stop. Then when you draw your rod towards you, so you pull the bobber towards you, the lure will actually lift up behind the bobber, and then it will arc back down in a slow arc. So it covers a lot of the water column. That's a popular technique for smallmouth, but it will work for trout too. It covers a lot of water. Now you get up to larger fish, you want to eat other fish. Use small jigged swim baits. This is just a mushroom head jig, 1/4 ounce, rigged on a paddle tail, little paddle tail, like a perch imitation. Now you can get these all different colors. I have other ones here that are white and black. You can get them in the colors of, par trout, fry, all sorts of small little bit shad, all sorts of small little bait fish. Another technique that's good with that I've actually been using. This is a technique that comes from Japan, but it does work with the trout too. Any type of predatory fish. It's called a nose hooking jig, and that's how it's rigged. This is a jackal clone fry, but that's how the rig would work. It's got a weight, it's got a fiber guard for weed, and you would nose hook the bait like that. Now when the bait is hooked in the nose like that, it's like hooking a minnow on a jig. If you put a live minnow on a jig like that, of course you just lip hook it, so of course it keeps the fish alive, and then he will swim around, and that's a killer technique. That's going to outfish any type of lure that you choose to use. There's no beating a live bait, but this is I have it rigged here on a trace for pike and stuff, but there's lots of action on that lure when it's rigged like that. Of course, when you let it when you can twitch it through the water just like you would a minnow, you can jerk it up and down, you can fish it vertically, you can fish it horizontally. It works really, really well, and it imparts a lot of action to that plastic bait and makes it look alive. I've had a lot of fish hit this when I twitch it through the water, and just let it sink and let it lay to the bottom, and the little minnow will actually sit up from the bottom like this, and a lot of times they'll come up behind it and just suck it right in. That works really well. Now for the salmon, the smaller salmon would eat the same as the trout. The bigger salmon, you would use spoons like this, the Daredevils. This is a slender spoon. Again, you use these for trawling. You can trawl them behind a boat. You can cast them from a bank. You can cast them from a boat. These will catch all sorts of predatory fish as well, lake trout. These two are used for bigger trout, bigger salmon. 5 of diamonds, that's a super popular color. Real old. Again, it's been around for years and years and years. And the spoon has a flashing, wobbling action. Again, you can trawl them behind the boat. You can depth rig them. Lots of different ways to fish them. There's a different style again. Holographic finish, so it flashes, makes a lot of flash in the water. And it wobbles like this in the water, and it swings from side to side. Any large predatory fish should have that too. A lot of times too, they'll run these on downriggers, so they run them at set depths. Sometimes later in the season, when the upper part of the water warms up, and then you have a thermocline in the lake, a lot of the bigger salmonoid species are gonna sit below that thermocline because the water is colder than the upper layer of water. So you have to find out what depth they're sitting at, and then you trawl your baits at that particular depth. The lake trout too. Lake trout favor deep, deep water. I mean, I've caught lake trout in New York that were in 100 feet of water, 100 feet down. So they will feed in very, very deep water. And to achieve that type of depth, you either have to fish a static bait on the bottom, or you have to rig a live bait at that depth, or you trawl with a downrigger to keep the bait at that particular depth. You can get these from small. You can just use these for the trout species too, or the landlocked salmon. Small sizes to this, to medium sizes, like that, up to super large sizes, like that. Same color, that red and white spoon, again, has been around for like 100 years. Super popular. Pike, muskie, lake trout, salmon, anything will eat that. You can get some small lures that the trout will eat. These are just smaller size bass lures, some top waters. There's a minnow rigged on a spinner bait. It's an inline spinner with a plastic minnow. And when the fishing really gets tough, you got to break out the beer cap spinner bait. That's after you break out the beer. See, this is a different type blade. This is a big spoon blade, so it displaces a lot of water, but you can't draw it through the water so fast, but it makes a lot of vibration. So if the water is darker, this type of spoon would work better. I hope that gave you some sort of insight into what we use in this particular part. I live in Northeast Pennsylvania, so East Coast, the Northeast coast of the United States. And those are all common trout baits that we'd use around here. But there's lots of different techniques. Of course, like I said, you're never going to outfish a live bait. But, you know, live bait can be a pain, especially if you're living in an area where you don't have easy access to it. And it's difficult to keep a lot. Of course, then you have to transport it. You have to keep it alive. Unless you're catching your own bait on that particular lake, you know, it can be pretty tricky. Also, you know, rules, you know, as regards transporting live bait from one lake to another, that's frowned upon a lot. And in some states, it's illegal to do that, or to transport live bait from one state to another is also illegal. And especially taking bait from the US into Canada, that would be illegal. So, you know, live bait has its problems too. But I hope that gave you an insight, Dave, as to what we were looking at here. Anybody that's watching too should check out Dave's channel. He does a lot of outdoor trapping, fishing, hunting, all sorts of stuff. He's got a great channel. So I hope that was helpful, Dave. Thanks for watching.